Today we're going to continue talking about translating words into math. A couple days ago we talked about different words and what they mean, like the sum of or the difference of means you're going to put parentheses. Increase means addition. Halved means you're dividing by 2. We discussed a whole different list of words. Yesterday we talked about turnaround words, words that make you flip the order that you're writing out the expressions or equations. Those 3 words were to, from, and than. Anytime you see those words in a math sentence, then that means that we are going to flip the order of how we are writing the numbers and variables. Today we're going to talk about writing out expressions and equations for word problems. There's a couple of steps that we want to make sure that we are doing every time we do this. So the first thing that we're going to want to do when we're doing this is to read the entire statement. Okay? Before we start annotating or making any marks or trying to write out any numbers or letters, we want to read through the statement first because we want to identify what our variables are. Okay? We want to know what the problem's asking us to do. We want to know what we're trying to find, what we're trying to answer. Okay? Reading through the problem will allow us to identify the variables. Now in algebra, we're going to have either 1 or 2 variables. We're not going to have any problems that have more than that. Okay, we could be talking about a simple problem like where they just want you to find a certain number, where then you're just going to have 1 variable. Okay, that number would be x. Or we'll have problems where we're talking about how many tickets were sold and how much money was made. So then you'd have 2 variables, the number of tickets sold and the total amount of money that was made by selling the tickets. So it just depends. That's why we're going to read through the problem to identify variables. So when you're doing this, you're looking for things that can change, numbers that can change. How many tickets were bought? How many baskets were made? How many cupcakes did they eat? Anything where the number's changing. How much money did they make? Things like that. So that's what we're looking for, identifying the variable. So there'll be either 1 or 2. There won't be more than 2 variables. And then third, we're going to reread the problem. And annotate. Oh, shit. Okay. So after we've reread the problem and we've annotated, we're going to do all 3 of these steps and let's go through a few examples to see what that is like. All right. So first I want to read the statement. First one is 8 times, and you can follow along on your note sheet. First one is 8 times the sum of 2 and a number. Okay. Reading that, what's the one thing that could change? What's the one thing that could be different? What's the one thing that would be a variable? It would be the number. Okay. I don't know what the number is, so that's my variable. That's going to be my x. Okay. I'm trying to figure out what the number is. So I'm going to make sure and write down and identify my variable first before I do anything else. Now that my variable has been identified, I'm going to reread it and I'm going to annotate as I do that. So on the first, the first thing would be 8, which is a number. Times means to multiply, so I put a little dot to remind me. The sum of Does anybody remember what the sum of or the difference of or the product of, when we have the blank of, what does that mean that we're going to be putting in the problem? We're going to be using parentheses, yes. So the sum of means I'm going to put the next things that follow it in parentheses with a plus sign because it's the sum. Sum means to add. And then we have 2 and a number, which is our x. So when I write this out, I'm going to have 8 times the quantity or the sum of, which is parentheses, 2 plus x. And again, it's addition because it said sum. If it said difference, then I'd be subtracting. If it said product, I'd be multiplying. So we've written out an expression for this sentence. Next example. Total cost of buying several shirts at $23.75 each. So what are the two different things that we're talking about here? Okay, we're talking about the cost and we're talking about the number of shirts we buy. Those are two variables. Those are two different things that in this problem could change. Okay, if I buy 2 shirts, then my cost is going to be different than if I buy 4 shirts. So depending on the number of shirts we buy, that's going to affect the cost. So both of those things are variables. So now we're going to reread it and annotate. The cost of buying several shirts at $23.75, shirts each. So we didn't really have any symbols there to tell us to multiply or add or divide or subtract. But from shopping and knowing things, we know that the cost is going to be equal to the number of shirts we buy. And in order to figure that cost out, we're going to multiply each shirt we buy by how much it costs. So the cost is equal to $23.75 because that's how many shirts we bought, or that's how much each shirt costs, times S. Next example. The number of gallons of water used to water trees is 30 times the number of trees. So there's two different variables here. I'm going to give you guys a second and think about it and see if you can figure out what are our two variables. So one variable is going to be the gallons of water. So I'll use G for gallons. The other variable is going to be the number of trees. Okay. The more trees that we have to water, the more gallons we're going to end up using. Okay. So both of these things are variables because both of these things can change in the course of the problem. So now I want to write out an equation for this situation. So the number of gallons, we decided G would be gallons, of water used to water trees is, the word is means equals, 30 times the number of trees. I'm using T for trees. Okay. So you can see, as we annotate it, and this is what's going to happen most of the time, that the problem is already written out for us. G equals 30T. So that would be the equation for that sentence. All right, last example that we're going to talk about. We have 5 less than the difference of a number and 7. Again, I'm going to give you guys a couple seconds. I want y'all to think. How many variables do we have here? How many of these things can be different and change? So in 5 less than the difference of a number and 7, the only variable, the only thing that we're not sure of is a number. Okay, we don't know what a number is, so we're just going to assign it a letter. Everything else, we understand what the word is, so those aren't variables. There's nothing in there changing. 5's always going to be 5, 7's always going to be 7, less is always going to be minus. So when we annotate it, we'll have, let me zoom in a little bit. So when we annotate it, we will have 5, less is minus, than is one of our turnaround words, so I want y'all to circle it, draw the arrows to remind you have to switch things. The difference of means that we are using, right, parentheses, and we will be subtracting inside the parentheses because it says difference. A number, which we decided was going to be x, and 7. Okay. So normally I would just write 5 minus x minus 7 in parentheses. But because we have the turnaround word, we're going to put all of this stuff first, this side, and then the minus 5 will go after it. So we have quantity of x minus 7, or the difference of x minus 7, minus 5. And that's this expression.